Okay, model, let's say today we're going to start on our Italeri Tornado, and the box art is beautiful on this thing. I just love the box art on this. That's a beautiful looking aircraft. Those markings are just sensational, but I'm not going to go with those markings. Now the reason being, I've built a few aircraft that got like tiger meat markings and things like that, and it's very hard to get an aircraft like that to look realistic. But like when you got decals and things like that, if you do all airbrushing and a heap of masking and airbrushing and stuff like that, yeah, that's one thing. But to do it with decals is a whole different thing. And I've looked at decals in this kit, and they're fairly average. Okay, I've measured them out, and they're going to overlap the wings and things like that. Now you can do it, and there's no problem with doing that. It's just a personal choice. I don't like doing really colourful aircraft, like tiger meat and stuff like that, because I can never ever get them to look quite right. So what I'm going to do with this kit here is, if you can see on the box art here, we're going to go with these versions here, probably this top version here. Now the reason being, I love that colouring on that, and it's something I can weather up really nicely. Okay, so you've got the Desert Storm versions of it, and that's what I'm going to go with, because you can really weather that up. You can put the jet exhaust over the wings and things like that. So anyway guys, what I'll do, I'll open up the kit here for you, just to have a quick look inside. Okay, so we've got our instructions first up. Now the instructions are very basic. Being an Italeri kit, I mean, you can't expect it to be like Dragon or anything like that, but very precise, very nice and plain. As you can see by the instructions here, it's not a very complicated kit. It's fairly straightforward. The only thing I'm worried about is any kit you have where you've got folding wings, like the F111 and things like that. It's okay when you got the wings laid back in the flying position, like that sleek look to it, because you can glue the flaps down. But when you got it open and landed on the ground, sometimes there's just too much of a gap there, and it just doesn't look quite right. So that's the only concern I've got with this kit, is when I get to that point there. Now when I get to that point there, obviously I'm going to have the video camera on and explain to you, whether it's going to work or not, and what we can do to fix it if it's not going to work. But other than that, everything is very straightforward. It's the typical build: cockpit, fuselage, then your wings, and then your fit outs like your bombs and things like that. Landing gear obviously in there somewhere. Looking at the parts now, I've opened this a little bit earlier. The clear parts are very nicely moulded. I've been through those. Now the actual parts inside here, I can't see any flash on there. There's a little bit of flash here and there, not a great deal. There's a few injector pin marks that I think we're going to have to take care of as we go through, like inside the cockpit and things like that. But we'll have to work that as we go through it. But everything's really nicely moulded, beautiful, like engraved panel lines and things like that. Really nice panel lines. They may be a little bit exaggerated for the scale, 1/48 scale. They may be a little bit exaggerated for it, but it's what you get with these cheap kits. And as like I was saying before, with the markings, you've got, well, the ones we're going to go for is these guys here, obviously. Now I bought this second hand, and you can see these have been out in the weather a little bit. They're not the nicest decals in the world, but I've got a clear coat I'm going to put over these to try and smooth them out and make them nice. I'm just a bit concerned when I put them in water they're going to disintegrate and fall apart. So I've got some micro mark stuff there that I'm going to put on that to try and fix that up. The seats have already been done, because like I say, I bought the second hand, so the seats have been done. And forgive my hands guys, I've just been playing with another kit, so that's why they're all black. These markings here, and you can see in the bottom of the box, these have that really nice colourful thing. And like I say, I took them out before and I measured up against the wing to get an overhang and all that sort of thing, and I'm just not too certain on it. So I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to go for the Desert Storm version. So anyway guys, I'll get on with this build, and I'll turn the camera back on as we need to. Okay modelers, so we've got sort of half the fuselage together here now. Now with the wings, you can see as I move them, they both move together because there's a rod in there that joins them together. Just move the instructions down. You can see in the instructions up in the corner here. I'll get into focus for you. There's a rod there that goes between the two wings that helps you move them backwards and forwards. Now, this gets used in a few kits. Okay, it's a good idea, the fact you can move the wings, but you've got to melt the plastic down to get it to sit nice and smooth. Otherwise, they can sit uneven. There's too much slop there and they move around. Now, this one here is not too bad with the front wings. They don't seem to sort of... There is movement there, obviously, as you can see. But once I've got the model posed, I'm actually going to glue it in place so that you can't move the wings. Otherwise, you know, you're going to have slop in them. So once I get to that point, I'll glue the wings in place. Now, the front wings, like I say, aren't too bad. But the tail wings here, again, they've got a little rod that goes across between them. And the idea is so you can flip them sort of up and down, like you move them up and down. Now, what I've done is glued them in place because there's just far too much slop in there. You can't just let them sit. One sits way lower than the other. Like, there's just too much slop in there. I mean, it's a good idea in theory, but in practice it's really hard to get it down. I melted them down to be flush with the other parts. The pins, I melted the pins right down, but there's just still too much slop. There's just too much give in there. Plus, if these tail wings sit down, you can see where the pin goes into the fuselage, and it just doesn't look right. So what I've done, I've glued them, just tack glued them from underneath, so that you still got the gap down in between the wing and the fuselage, because obviously the real tail wings do flip up and down, and if you don't have that gap there, it's not going to look right for the aircraft. So I've glued it from underneath. The glue did seep up into the top here a little bit, but what I'll do is I'll scribe that out to make sure that there's a gap in there. Yeah, okay, you can see the pin in there, but you should be able to see a pin in there where it pivots anyway. But if you don't have them glued there, they just hang down too much and it just looks awful because there's a big gap and you can see a pin sticking right out. The real aircraft, you can't see that. There's just the slightest gap down in there. The actual fuselage itself, like going together, you can see there's a little bit of gap there between the back and the front. On the other side here, it's not too bad. So the fit there is not too bad at all. There's going to be a little bit of filling and sanding to get into that. But the thing is with these big gaps back here, like anything that's got folding wings, it just doesn't look right with that open with a dirty big gap in there, because normally there's blades that come forward and cover that up as it goes up. You don't want to have an aircraft that has got big suction holes like that in it. So you can either pose it shut like that to cover that gap up, or you can have it open and put some fins in there yourself. As I go through the kit, I'm not sure if there's blades to go in there or not. If there isn't, I'll make some to put in there. I'll have a look at photos of the real aircraft to make sure that I get that right. The cockpit itself, let's pull it out over here. Okay, the cockpit section, I've got all the cockpit itself painted down there. I'll try and get this to focus a little bit for you. Hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit down inside there. Okay, we'll get it up into the centre of the framing. Hopefully you can see a little bit up inside there. The cockpit itself is very, very simple. It's got a little bit of detail in there, but it's fairly plain compared to some of the new kits, like the new modern kits got a bit more in them. But I've just basically painted that up. This one here, I'm going to have the canopy closed over it, so you're not going to be able to see a lot down in there anyway. It's a bit glossy and shiny at the moment. I'm going to dull that up with some dull coat once I paint all the inside here in the right colour. But so far, guys, the fit's not too bad at all. Now, just one thing to make sure you do get is this spacer in the front here. Make sure you do put that in, because if you haven't got that in, you won't get that distance there right. Okay, and when the fuselage joins to the front part where the cockpit is, if you haven't got that gap right, that's not going to line up. Okay, so make sure you've got that spacer in there. Plus, it just stops it all from sagging, all that sort of thing. But so far, nice fit, guys. So far, it's a nice kit. The wings went together in two pieces. They lined up very, very nicely. There was just a little bit of sanding to get seams out, but nothing major. So far, pretty good. And the next step is putting the cockpit part onto the back part of the fuselage, putting the jet exhaust onto the back, tail wing and so on. And then I've got to decide whether I want to have the brake flaps opened and things like that. But as I get to it, I'm going to see what sort of fit they are. If they're not a very nice fit down there, I'll leave them open and paint up the inside separately. But yeah, as we go through the build, guys, I'll turn the camera back on when I get to those steps. So the point we're up to now, I've got the fuselage together. Obviously you can see the wings, tail wings, everything in there. Now you'll probably be able to see quite a bit of Mr. Surface of putty all around here because there was some fairly large gaps in there. My biggest concern is the wings. Now the wings are in the right position because there's pins to hold them in there, but when I bring them forward you can see this large gap right up in front here, and an even bigger concern is the gap at the back here. Now normally there's like a sheet that sits in there. When the wings come forward, the sheet sort of fills in the gap. Now I've built a Tornado before. I think it was an Italeri, but a different kit. But it did have an insert that you put inside there if you wanted to have the wings displayed in certain ways. But this one hasn't got it, and you can't have the wings forward and have that really big gap there. It just does not look right. That's not how they are. The solution I've come up with is, you see on the other side here. Okay, and all I've done is put some sandpaper, just this stuff here, it's old stuff that I've got, and I've super glued it in there and put the slit down there where the wing will fold back in it. Now because there's a slit there, I can fold the wing back, but when I pull it forward, because it's sandpaper, it bends that sandpaper down, and I've got to sort of pull it back out again. But I want to have the wings mounted forward on this, so once I've got this all set up, I might actually sort of glue these tops down just a little bit so there's not that big gap under there as well. You can see there where that wing meets, there's not actually supposed to be a big gap in there. So I might glue that down, pose the wings forward, and hopefully it'll look okay. So all I want to do is show you now how I've done this. Now obviously I've cut the sandpaper out to roughly the shape. I've put a V inside there so it'll slip over that wing. Now all I'm going to do is, now just forgive me if I stop talking every now and then guys, because it's a really strange angle I'm trying to do this at. So all I do is get it fairly well in place where I want to put it, and just have a quick look to make sure it's going to cover everything. Okay, yep, and it looks like it's going to. And I've got a little bit of super glue over on the side here, put it on the toothpick. Now I want to get it down in this part here, then push the sandpaper against it and get it to stick there. Okay, now I'm going to do the same on the bottom, and once the glue's set I'll trim back the excess there, and I'll give it a little bit of a file over the edge as well to round it off, because on the actual aircraft this is actually like an insert. It should be on the inside. So if I was to build this model again, I'd actually put this on the inside, so it looks a little bit more realistic. But this is going to do for what we're after on this one here, just to cover that ugly big gap up. Going by the amount of things that I've got to sort of fill and sand and that on this aircraft, it's not going to probably be one of my best builds. I do enjoy a challenge on you know, things that don't fit properly, but this thing's got quite a few. The intakes here, the air intakes, just don't line up properly. You can see at the front here there's that little notch where the inside of that intake doesn't come up far enough. I'm going to have to put some little square plastic in there, try and fill that in a little bit. And like I say, the mount of the tail and everything here, that it's just awful big gaps. The brakes, the flat brakes on the back here, when you put them in place, they don't line up properly, so I had to sort of file and sand them. And even then, you can't sort of get them right. Like one end's too narrow, the other end's too wide. They're too long. So by the time you sort of fit it in there, there's still going to be a few gaps. You're never going to get them to sit down, you know, absolutely flat. So I've put a bit of filler in there. I'm going to sand it back. Now what I could have done is pose those open. That would have made it much easier. You don't have to worry about the gaps so much. But I want this aircraft to be on the ground, fully loaded, just sitting there, and it just wouldn't look right if it's got speed, the speed flaps up, the brake flaps up there. They just don't pose like that when they're sitting on the deck. So I've got those closed. There's a few other fit issues, like underneath here. You can see under here, the top part of it all sort of fitted together okay. There's a gap in the bottom here. The front of the wing, the leading cover over here, doesn't fit properly. The underneath of the air intakes is just not, they're just never going to fit there. This one here is not as bad, but this one here, it's fitted flush and all that sort of thing, but there's just that awful big chunk there. I'll try and turn around so you can see a bit better. You can see that there, that little bit of a notch, so I'm going to have to fill that in as well. The front part of these, now when the wings are right forward like that, there's this big gap in here. Now what I'm thinking of doing is maybe sort of moulding the plastic, like heat the plastic maybe and bend it back in a little bit so it sort of moulds back into the wing a little bit more. If I just fill that in, it's not going to look right. They don't have a square flat surface in there unless the wings are folded back and then the rubber strips fall in there. But with this thing just sitting with the wings fully, fully extended, there shouldn't be a gap like that. It's just awful. So just be aware, guys, if you do this kit, there is going to be these sorts of faults that you have to play around with and get it right. But that's why I do these kits. I mean, you can pick these up cheap, and it's part of the joy of modelling, I guess. Sometimes I get tired of doing this, but it's a good learning curve. Like, this is how you learn your skills, by trying to get aircraft like this to look good. And hopefully you guys will learn a little bit off this video while I go through and do this. So anyway, guys, I'll keep going on with this. I'll turn the camera back on once I get to the next step. Okay, modeler, so the point we're up to now is I'm starting to put the paint on the aircraft, and I just want to show you exactly what I've done here. The first thing I've done is put on a grey undercoat. It was just a Tamiya grey colour. I think it's intermediate grey or something like that. I just sort of put that down to give it something to stick to, give the paint something to stick to. Once I've got that paint to stick down there and I'll let it dry, I'll give it a really light sand with a 1200 grit sandpaper. And then after that, I went around and I drew out the panel lines just in the black. I think it was just the Tamiya black. I just drew out the panel lines. You'll probably see it a little bit more over on these wings over here. Okay, you can see where I've drawn the black on there, and I haven't painted over it properly yet. So what I've done, I put the black down, then I put the deck tan colour over the whole aircraft. Just a really fairly light sort of coat, so you can see, hopefully you can see it on the video camera here, that you can still see that black underneath the deck tan. And then I've gone to the MIG ammo paints, these guys here. Okay, this is the colour I'm using here, which is a tan colour, which is the closest I can sort of find to this colour, this aircraft colour. And what I'm doing is I'm drawing around, like around the panel lines, like just drawing it so it's nice and thick around there. And then I just put a mist over it, so you're getting more of a dark colour of that tan over the panel lines. Just putting a mist over it, or sort of patchy sort of coat over the top. I'll quickly show you what I mean. It's not, just forgive the sound of the air compressor in the background here. Just have to let the pressure build up a little bit. So all I've got in here is the deck tan inside this, inside the paintbrush here, and it's not watered down or anything. It's straight out of the jar, and just got to wait for the pressure to build up just a little bit, guys. And what I'll do, I'll roll the aircraft over, and I'll show you on one of these back wings first exactly what I'm doing. Now just please forgive me because I'm doing this at a fairly strange sort of angle. So all I'm doing is just putting down like a coat over the panel line like so. Okay, so it's a proper coat. So I'm going to get that exact colour that I'm after. I'm just got to clean the paintbrush out a little bit there. Got a little bit on the tip. Okay, so like so, and like so. Okay, so all I'm doing is making sure that I've got a nice colour over those lines. Now I've already got the black underneath there, so it's going to make sure that that's fairly dark sort of coat that I'm putting on those panel lines. Okay, I'll go over it a few times just to make sure I'm getting a nice coat on there. Okay, so that when that dries, it's going to be pretty much the exact same colour as what I'm spraying, but because I've got the black underneath it, it'll be just that little bit darker. Okay, and I've got a little bit more to do here, just up into these panels, right up into the fuselage here. Okay, a little bit more paint through the brush, just for a little bit better. Now I don't use the MA paint much. This is probably, I don't know, the about the 10th time I've used it or something like that. I don't use it a lot. I'm not comfortable using it because I haven't used it a great deal. It's very, very different to use to, say, to near paints or something. So anyway, that's what we're up to now. We've got get that to focus for you. Hopefully it'll focus in the right place, righto. So I'm going to open the airbrush up a little bit more now, and just put it like a random sort of coat over it. Okay, I've given that one little coat there now. Going to let that dry for a little bit. I'll just sort of blow air through the airbrush to sort of dry it off a bit. Now the reason I dry this off a little bit, because if I go over it again straight away, it will actually sort of gloss over, as in it's trying to put too thick of a coat on. So now that it's dried off a little bit, I'll put a little bit more of a coat over it, like so. Just keep swaying your airbrush around to make it sort of misty and not too sort of straight, not too much of a dark coat. And as you can see there now, get this into focus again for you, and you can sort of see the effect I'm after is starting to show up now. Okay, where you haven't got just a nice neat coat, you've got fading in the middle of the panels, and it's dark at the edge of the panels, and that's the look I'm after. So hopefully when I turn this over again, and I'll show you on the wing, once it's dry, that's the sort of effect you're looking at. It gives it a nice weathered sort of appearance. Like at this stage here, it maybe looks a little bit too overdone, but once we do the weathering on the aircraft, like, you know, fill in the panel lines with the dark wash and stuff, it will actually come to life, and it'll actually look really, really nice. It's good to do it at this stage here rather than do the post shading, because post shading can take a lot of time, because, you know, you're using pastels or oils or whatever it is to do the post shading, and there's a lot of panels on this aircraft and it can take a lot of time. This way here, you have a little bit more control over it than you do with the post shading. The post shading can look a little bit severe on this sort of aircraft. You want a bit of a weathered look, but you don't want it too severe. So this technique gives us a really, really nice finish, and hopefully you can see that on that wing there. It's a nice sort of, you know, very uneven pattern. We've got about, you know, 3 or 4 different colours working together there to give us that sort of broken up look, rather than having just that one sort of colour over the whole lot. The next step is I'm going to put a gloss coat over this. I'm going to put the decals on there, then I'll do the pin washes, and then I'll put a dull coat over it, and we'll start doing a bit more weathering. But hopefully you can see that by the look of that there. That's a really nice effect. That's the sort of weathering that we're after. It's not overdone, it's not underdone. It's just quite nice for this sort of aircraft that's been working in the desert. It's been sort of sandblasted a bit. Okay guys, I'll turn the camera back on at the next step. Okay modelers, so just a quick little technique I want to show you here that I'm using on this aircraft is to do with doing the panel lines. Now what I do, I go over all the panel lines in a Sharpie. Get this to focus hopefully on the Sharpie pen here, just one of these little guys, little fine pointed one. And I go over all the panel lines with that first. And then I use a cotton bud and just wipe off the excess. Now you can let this sit for, you know, half an hour, a couple of hours, whatever, and that stuff's not going to dry completely. But you can go over. Now all I do is just go around little swirling patterns, like so. Now what that does, it not only sort of wipes the excess off around the outside, as you can see, but it also puts that bit of a stain around the panel line, you know, as in post shading and pre shading and stuff like that. So you're getting 2 effects for one here. You're doing your panel line washes, plus you're doing like your post or pre shading. This one here obviously is a post shading by doing this technique. It just saves you having to go around in pastels or whatever you want to do the post shading in. Now it's a fairly easy technique, as you see. It's just a matter of, you know, swirling the cotton bud around. Sometimes you'll have a fair bit of stuff around that little joint there, but it should pick up fairly easy like so. Okay, now if you get like swirl patterns or whatever, just go over with the cotton bud and rub those out. It's a very easy technique, but you will go through a few cotton buds. You've got to keep changing the cotton bud. If it starts to soak up too much black, you're never going to get that sort of effect that you're after, okay? So obviously I'll go around to all the panel lines that I've done to do this technique, okay? And at the end of it, what I do is I sort of judge where it's worked and where it hasn't worked. And if it hasn't worked in a certain area, I will do a bit of post shading with pastels, okay? I'm hoping that light has picked that up well enough for you there. You can see that final finish, what it comes up like. I'll get a bit more light in here for you. So you can see there, that's come up really, really nicely. Now the leading edge of that wing is like that really faded colour, which I want because it's the leading edge of the wing, so it's sort of been sandblasted a fair bit. This particular aircraft was used in a very sandy environment, so you want to have those sandblasted leading edges, and you want to have a very subtle tonal shift like that is. So anyway guys, I'll keep going around. I'll do the rest of the aircraft like this. I've got the rest of the panel lines drawn in. I'm going to go around and clean them all up now and have that sort of post shading sort of look to it all. Once you see the whole aircraft done like this, it'll give you an idea of just what a nice little technique this is. Obviously you have to seal this in. If you don't seal it in, every time you handle it, you're going to wipe more of that post shading off, and that'll just ruin it, and you'll have to go over and do it with the pastels and then seal that in as well. I've still got to obviously paint over the exhaust here in the black. Still got to do all the landing bay and the wheels and all that sort of thing. But I'll go around and get this done. I'll paint up all the landing bays and the jets. The jets will just be painted black, and then I'll put a bit of like burn exhaust from Alclad or something like that over just to sort of. Yeah, sorry there guys, I just ran out of card there. Like I just ran out of room on that card, so it cut out in the middle of that. But like I was saying, I'm just going to paint these exhausts up now. I've got to paint the landing bays. I'm going to paint the exhaust in a black colour, like a glossy black. Then I use some Alclad. I'll tape it off, use some Alclad to sort of give it a burn exhaust look. The landing bays and that, obviously I'm going to weather those up the same way I've sort of done this. I may just use an ordinary wash, like an oil wash or something like that in the landing bays, because this technique doesn't work as well in the landing bays. Too many fiddly parts and things like that. But anyway guys, I'll turn the camera back on at the next step, and we'll continue on. Okay modelers, so we're finished off now, and the first thing I've got to say is please ignore the canopy. The canopy is absolutely destroyed because I had a lamp fall over when the canopy was drying, and it cracked the canopy. So I've put the canopy back on there now, but it's absolutely destroyed, and I've got like bits of dust and stuff inside there because I've only just sort of glued that canopy on there as a temporary thing. What I've done is I've ordered another canopy for this aircraft. I'll repaint it and put it on later on when that canopy turns up. So please ignore the canopy. It just doesn't suit the aircraft. But I haven't got it glued on properly. It's split and it's cracked and it's got dust on the inside. It's just absolutely had it, guys. So the rest of the aircraft is what I really wanted to show you. Please forgive me clearing my throat because I've got a bit of a flu at the moment. But the rest of the aircraft is, like I've shown you before, with the Sharpie pen, going over, drawing in the panel lines, and then sort of doing that post shading sort of effect with that Sharpie pen over it. And as you can see, it's come out really, really nice. That coupled with the fading techniques with the paint that I showed you in the earlier step there, where we had the pre and the post shading with the paint and the different shades of paint going in there, it's come up really nice as a finish. Now, one of the things with this aircraft, if you look at the actual photos of this aircraft in service, it had some really, really big exhaust stains up over the back tail here. Now, you can see that on there where I put those exhaust stains on there. Now, if you look at the actual aircraft, they're even more severe than that. But the thing I found is I sort of got to this point with putting those exhaust stains on, and I thought if I go any further, it's just not going to look realistic for a model. With a model, you sort of want to underdo some things and overdo other things, but this is one of the things I wanted to underdo, because if I had to put more on there as a model in real life, like the way I'm sitting here looking at it, that's enough. If I had to put more on there, it just would have been overdone. Okay. The actual exhausts themselves, all I done there is put the black over it. Then I painted like with the Alclad the burn exhaust over the back here, and I put a little bit of clear blue and purple over the back there as well. It's just to give them that sort of like it's been really heated up metal, and it sort of burned it and left that bit of a burnt look. If you see the actual aircraft itself, you don't see the blue and the purple in there, but I thought with the model itself, it gives it that little bit more of effect, where you can see this actual metal that's been really heated up. But the rest of the aircraft is like the techniques I showed you earlier on. There's nothing different I've done to it. There's no other techniques I used on it. Everything's pretty much the same. The only thing I've got to do now to finish off this aircraft is to go over to panel lines on the fuel tanks and the bombs and things like that. And maybe looking in this camera, I'm sort of looking off to the side here. It looks like the bombs are crooked, but they're actually not. The way I'm looking at it in real life, they're actually lined up. That's one of the things you have to be careful of in this aircraft. If you have the wings folded back or forward, those bombs will always line up dead straight with the aircraft, because as the wings folded back, the bombs would actually be on a pivot, so that they'd be dead straight with the aircraft. You wouldn't have the wings folded back and the bombs pointing out crooked. They would always be the same angle as the aircraft. And one of the things I want to sort of show you on here is in the back here, like I was saying, if I didn't put those sandpaper pieces in there, it doesn't look all that great anyway, but it's a lot better than having a great big black hole inside here. You can see a slit in there where the wings can fold back, where the rubber pieces, the rubber slats would be, where they're fold back in. There's not much else I can sort of tell you about it, guys. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to take any still photos of this aircraft because, like I say, I've destroyed the canopy on it. I'm really disappointed the fact that I've destroyed that. If I had the canopy nice and clear and all that, I would have taken some nice photos of it. But if I take photos with that canopy on there, you're going to see all the dust particles inside it. You're going to see the cracks inside it and all that sort of thing. I just don't want to do that. So I'm just going to leave it as a video, and hopefully you can pick up how nice it's come up, and hopefully you guys will get a little bit of a boost out of this, and you want to build some aircraft that are in, like, it's only a one colour, but it shows you how to break one colour up on an aircraft. Okay, so you can have aircraft where you've got all different colours and stuff like that, like camouflage patterns and stuff like that, and that's fine. But when you've got an aircraft that's just one colour, it doesn't mean that it's going to be boring. Okay, this shows you how you can have a one colour aircraft, and you can have it so it looks really nice, and you can break up that one colour. So anyway, guys, leave the comments below. Please don't comment on how bad the cockpit is or the canopy is, because I know that the canopy is actually really bad. But the rest of it, guys, I'm always open to criticism, and leave comments below. If you haven't subbed, please sub to the channel, guys, because there's going to be more of these videos coming. Just one thing I want to add to this now. It may sound like I'm a little bit drunk or something like that, but I'm very ill at the moment. Plus tomorrow I'm going on a holiday for 2 weeks, guys, so there won't be any videos going up for the next 2 weeks or so. I'll put some videos on my channel to show you what I'm doing the next 2 weeks. I'm going up right up to the top of my state, right up to the top on a bit of a holiday. Anyway, guys, I'll put that up in a separate video. But anyway, guys, leave the comments below that you need, and sub to the channel if you haven't subbed, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thanks very much for watching.